All right, let's talk power here for a second. I've got quite an unusual setup, but I think it'll make more sense as I explain it. So you're gonna notice that I have an EcoFlow battery sitting here. Now that is not the only power source that I have. So I'm gonna see if I can set you on this table and show you what I'm talking about. All right, I hope you can see that. So we have the EcoFlow battery here. It's just strapped down. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this so you can see what I've done here. And it is a little unusual, but I think it'll make more sense. Now, part of the reason why I did this is I already have this, and I like to use this battery for more than just the camper. I use it for tools, and I like to be able to take it outside with me. So this remains super, super removable. I just gotta unplug a few things here. Bob's your uncle. She's loose, and I could take this outside, I could do whatever. Now under here, you're gonna see that I put in this little tab here, this little pin, and this keeps the wood from rocking off, since I pretty much keep this battery on top of here when I travel, so it just keeps everything from sliding off. So you just pull it out, and then this slides back. And I'll turn on a few lights here. Now, you can basically see I've got some stuff happening in here. Now there's a 100 amp hour battery down there. I've got a Wanderer, what model is this? A Wanderer, it's the Renogy Wanderer, excuse me. And that's a solar like manager, it's a charge controller basically. And so the solar that's on top of this camper plugs into that, and that charges my 100 amp hour battery. Now you're gonna notice I've got this little glowing thing here. This is the EcoFlow alternator charger. This is pretty much made for like camping vans so that it works off the alternator off of your vehicle while it's running. But I did something different. I've got it hooked up to my camper battery, and then it hooks up to my EcoFlow battery. So let me button this up and I'll explain a little bit more. Gotta take all the cables out here, and they just squeeze out the back. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt, but I don't really undo this very often, so it's not really that big of a deal. And I'll explain these 3 cables that I'm pulling out here in just a sec. Just need to get this stuff out here. And there's a little notch here that I made where all of this just kind of buttons up and comes out. There we go. So this squeezes in there like that. Take this pin and it plugs into a hole right here. Just keeps the whole thing from falling off. Now, you're gonna notice I have 3 different cables here. This is the EcoFlow DC to DC charger. This plugs in from my battery to that controller into my EcoFlow. This is for solar. This is extra solar that I can plug in. So this gets powered in through the wall and on the outside, and I'll show you where that plugs in. But what this enables me to do is put out additional solar power on top of the solar power that I already have on the camper. So that Renogy Wanderer that you saw in there has a max solar input of about 400 watts. But this thing has a max of 800 watts. So technically, I can combine both to have additional solar. Now they operate separately, but this DC to DC charger allows me to transfer power from either the battery into there or from there into here. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because there are some grocery stores that don't allow dogs, like in Texas. And I don't exactly want to leave the dog in the car because that's also illegal. So what I do is I transfer power from that battery to this, and I keep the AC running with the dog in here so he's nice and comfortable. Now this is what powers my AC stuff. So this is a little unusual. You have shore power on the outside, which let me show you that really quick. Hi, Kirk. Now the important thing about what I did here with this plug is that I basically split it off. This goes directly into the camper, into basically a breaker panel. And what I did is, before this goes into the breaker panel, I put the junction switch that I'll show you in a second. It's a changeover switch, and that basically allows me to change whether or not I'm directing energy from this source or the source that's inside. Okay, now that I've got it all put back, kind of show you in the back here, we have our DC to DC charger plug here. We have our AC outlet that this cable goes underneath and goes to this guy. And then we've got our solar power plugged in right now. And I'll show you where this guy goes in just a second. So now that that's all buttoned up, I can go here, put that to number 2. We're gonna see some power comes on. There's my little thermometer that's AC powered. And now we're running off of AC power. So I've got both DC and AC power. And what's really cool about this setup is, if at some point this is completely full, it's a super cloudy day, but my the camper battery under here, the 100 amp hour battery, if that's running really low, I can pull power from here to charge that, or vice versa. So when I'm running the AC, this thing will run the AC for about 3 hours, but if I need a little more than that, I can activate that DC to DC EcoFlow charger, and it will pull power from this 100 amp hour battery and put it in here to prolong the amount of time I have with that air conditioner. What's really cool too is, while I'm driving, the truck will charge that battery, and this battery will push power into here, so everything's charging when the vehicle's running. On the camper, I already have solar installed up here, and the way I get up here, kind of see this. I'm gonna step on this box, see if I can do this one-handed without killing myself. We're gonna crawl up here, and you can see I've got one 200 amp hour Renogy solar panel there, and I've got another Renogy 200 watt solar panel there. So I've got 400 watts of potential energy just on top of the camper, and that feeds directly into the Renogy Wanderer, which powers the camper. But it gets even better. Come over here and you'll notice I have a 400 watt capable and a 200 watt capable solar panel put up here, and it's kind of a cloudy day, so I'm not getting much, but it's pulling something. And these plug into a splitter, which you can see right here, into an XT60i, that's what these plug types are called, extension. And if we follow it up, plugs right here into the side of the camper. So this is that cable you saw that plugs into the EcoFlow battery. Now, this is where it gets a little interesting. So I have 400 watts on top with my Wanderer that it maxes out at 400 watts anyway. So I'm maxed out there. But by doing this with my EcoFlow, that gives me an additional 800 watts. So I have 1200 watts of potential solar power that I could plug in here, which is pretty sweet. And just to cover something about these, this is a 400 watt portable EcoFlow solar panel, but just because it says 400 watts, it doesn't mean you're gonna get that. That's potential. Most of the time, I think the max I've maxed out on this is like 312, 320. It has to be super ideal conditions for you to get that max 400 watts. But that's why you want to double up. Normally, I actually only use the little guy, the 200 watt, and that's more than enough to charge it throughout the day. But as you can see, we're basically in a valley here, so we don't get much sunlight. Plus, it's a little cloudy. We've got trees in the way. So I want to try to maximize as much power as I can so that we can charge up that EcoFlow battery. Okay, so with those two solar panels, you can kind of see the inputs fluctuating a little bit as the clouds kind of pass by. But if you look in that top right hand corner, that's my solar input. So it's increasing right now as a cloud dissipates. So we're over 200 and almost 300 watts of solar input. But you'll notice on the very top left, it shows 319 watts of input. And that is because if we go back into the DC to DC charger that I have, right now we can see here that that's providing an additional about 40 watts of additional power. Now, you can set this. So my max power voltage in the camper battery, which is 100 amp hours, sits at around 14.2 volts. So over the course of the day, as the RV battery, the 100 amp hour battery, is charging, once it hits 13.7 volts, it starts sending additional input to my EcoFlow battery. That way I can maximize the 2 solar panels that I have on the camper. Because if I don't do that, what ends up happening is I'll hit 14.2 volts, and then since that battery is full, those 2 solar panels on top of the the camper, are completely useless at that point. They're not doing anything. So what this allows me to do is skim off the top. So as we reach to about 98-ish% on my 100 amp hour battery, the additional wattage that I'm incurring from that, the 2 solar panels on the camper, are then inputted into the EcoFlow battery. And normally I can get a pretty steady 100 watts, but you'll notice at the bottom it says maximum output power. If I click on that, I can change that. 100 watts is more than enough, and honestly, even 100 watts is probably a little much for the area that I'm at with the amount of tree coverage that there is. But if I go to the very top right, there's a little gear icon. And in here, you can choose the battery type, which I have a 12 volt. And then right here where it says start voltage, I can change when I want that voltage, the additional power that I'm getting from that battery. Once that battery reaches 13.7 volts, it will start sending the excess to the EcoFlow battery. And you can change that. I do find that 13.7 is kind of the sweet spot and under. If I go over that, what ends up happening is the EcoFlow alternator charger will shut down randomly, and it's because there's not enough wattage coming in at the peak of that battery. So it turns itself on and off again, and then eventually it just stops and says, hey, I need to restart. So 13.7 seems to be the sweet spot. So right now, the battery's at 13.7. All the excess, as you can see, is being sent to the EcoFlow battery, sitting at about 80% right now. And I have that EcoFlow battery capped at about 90%. So once 90% hits, it stops charging, and then any remaining voltage or wattage that those 2 solar panels on top of the camper can pick up will just top it off to about 14.2. I'm not really reaching full anything in the current spot that I'm at. I'm getting 80 to 90% in both batteries doing this method, but that's more than enough over the course of an evening to power my laptop, watch movies, run the heater. It's enough for everything. And this is a little complicated, but it provides you a ton of control, which I really like. And I can reverse this method too. So if I go into the start of my camping day and my camper battery is almost dead, but my EcoFlow is full, I can send 100 watts the other direction, so that I'm pushing solar in either system, whichever that I need. This obviously would be significantly easier if you just had a larger battery and then like a converter to AC power, but you just get less control that way. This way, I'm not damaging any batteries. It works on its own. I don't really have to mess with anything once you set it, and it just gives me bi-directional control, which I really like. Okay, so now that you've seen what kind of hardware is in the camper, and its location, I think this might be best described in a diagram. So I'm going to go over the basics first. If you already know this, go ahead and skip it. But I want to talk through the reasons why I did this setup, and talk about some of the power complications that exist within my camper. So within any camper, you have 2 different forms of power. You have AC power, which is represented by this fuse box. And this is an actual picture of the fuse box in my camper. And then you also have DC power, which is in the form of stored power through a battery. In my case, I have a 100 amp hour lithium battery. Sorry, my handwriting is atrocious. So, if we're talking about the powering the essentials in a camper, you've got lights, you've got a heater, you've got air conditioning, you have a microwave, you have your fridge, and you have fans. Now, the fridge gets a little more complicated. In my particular case, I have a two-way, which means that my fridge is powered either through propane or through AC current. A lot of campers are three-way fridges, which means that they can maintain their temperature off of DC current. So like when you're driving to your destination, the power coming from the alternator of your vehicle will maintain the temperature of the fridge. However, it's important to note that DC maintainers aren't going to do best at bringing the temperature down initially. It's just a means of maintaining that temperature while you're on your way to your destination. My camper only has a two-way, so that is part of the issue that I'm going to have. But we also have here at the very last, you have fans in the camper. You have exhaust fans. In my case, I have three, one in the bathroom, one overhead on the kind of kitchen area, and then I've got another one in the bedroom. But I've also got another fan that's on top of the range so that it can exhaust the cooking, fumes and stuff from the camper. So in most cases, let's just talk about my camper, but this is going to apply to most cases. In most cases, all of your lights are going to be powered by DC. Your heater has a fan in it, even though it might be propane powered, not electric powered. Some also have electrical powered heaters. Mine is propane only. So the fan that's in my propane heater is DC powered. My air conditioning is not a 12-volt DC air conditioner. Some of them have them. There's debates whether or not they're kind of worth it. They are extremely efficient, but if you are in a very hot environment, it's not going to do the best. But in my case, my air conditioning is AC powered. My microwave is AC powered. My fridge is propane or AC powered. And all of my fans are DC powered. So this kind of separates everything into two different categories of things that are powered in my camper. So we can kind of see the issue here. If you are camping in the middle of nowhere and you don't have hookups, you are going to be running all of these systems off of this battery. And it really just depends on how much battery you're going to have left. So you need to maintain, um, you just have to be energy conscious. If you don't have a way of being able to recharge this battery, you just need to keep an eye and monitor that battery so that you're not using everything so that you don't have any lights when nighttime rolls around, right? Um, as for the AC current, you're not going to be able to run any of these things if you're in the middle of nowhere. Your microwave, your fridge, your air conditioning, an electric heater, any devices that you want to plug in to charge, so like a laptop or your TV, anything like that, you're not going to be able to run that unless you purchase something like a generator or some other options we'll get to in a second. But this is my current camper setup. Now let's talk a little bit about the hardware that came with my camper. So don't worry about these images yet. We're going to get into why those are there in just a second. So for any camper, they're going to come with a means of plugging into shore power, which is this guy right here. In my camper's case, I have a 30 amp plug, if I can spell. And this can be plugged into a house, or if you're at a campsite, there'll be a tower that has a 30 amp plug that I can directly just plug into. And that will in turn charge and run anything that is in this AC category here. Now, what's cool with most campers is that if I'm plugged into shore power, the very last fuse, which is right here, is my converter. That will convert AC power to DC current so that I can charge my my battery while I'm plugged into shore power. Now, my camper also came with solar already pre-installed when I bought it. It came with a Renogy 200-watt solar panel that fed directly into a Wanderer charge controller that has a 400-watt solar max. I can then communicate to that charger by using this battery monitor that it came with already. That battery monitor is okay. It's going to tell you how many amp hours you have left, the percentage. Just keep in mind it's kind of like an estimate. The real benefit with that chart with that battery monitor is that it will tell you the current wattage of solar that you're inputting into the battery, and that's really the only thing I like about it, if I'm being completely honest. In my particular case, since I have a 100 amp hour lithium battery, the way you get that battery monitor to sync up is you have to completely drain it. You mark the like empty point on that battery monitor, and then theoretically, once that battery is 100%, that battery monitor will reflect 100%. However, in my particular case, my battery maxes out at about 14.2 volts, and that battery monitor will show that it's full at about 13 volts. So it's not great in my use case. My battery will also has a BMS built in, which is a battery management system, which will completely shut off power once it reaches 10.6 volts. That's to protect the battery. And the battery monitor will send crazy alarms after it dips below 11 volts, which is kind of annoying. But maybe I'll do a review on that later. But anyway, in my camper, I've got that battery monitor. It's really only good for monitoring the current voltage of my battery and the amount of solar that's coming in. Now, that charge controller's job is to feed current into my 100 amp hour lithium battery. Now, that charge controller is very important. If you just fed the lithium solar excuse me, if you just fed the solar into the lithium battery, you risk potentially overcharging that battery, which can lead to damage. So what's cool about that charge controller is if it says, hey, I can see that this battery is reaching optimal voltage, it's currently sitting at about, 85, 90%, even though I might be getting 200 watts of solar in, it will limit the amount of current going into that battery. It also maintains the current, so it's not having like crazy spikes and stuff. So overall, it's safe and it's really important for the life of your battery for maintaining it. Okay. So this is the system. This is all of the hardware that came with my camper. Now, where I started drawing some issues here. I'm obviously traveling with my dog. And there are some states that don't allow their dogs in a grocery store if they're not a service dog. My dog is not a service dog. I'm not going to do that thing where you print off the fake paperwork and say he is a service dog. It just seems a little dishonest to me. But it's also illegal to leave my dog in the car. In some states, it's okay to leave the dog in the camper as long as they're comfortable. So in my case, my heater runs independently. I've got a thermostat, so if it's cold, he's warm in here while I run and get some groceries and come back. But during the summer, this becomes a problem because some of the areas that we plan on going to get really freaking hot. And an exhaust fan going is not going to be enough to keep him comfortable and safe inside the camper. The temperatures can get really high. So I need a way of being able to run my air conditioning while I am away inside of the vehicle, as well as just being able to run some of these AC components while I'm in the middle of nowhere. I want to be able to um, run my microwave to pop some popcorn, as an example. Easiest way to be able to do this is get a generator. However, with my truck camper setup, that means mounting a generator somewhere where there isn't a lot of storage. I do have a storage rack on the back, but then I also risk the potential of somebody stealing it. I've got maintenance to consider, and then I've also got gasoline that I have to stock up on, which I don't like doing because I'm on a diesel truck, so I don't want to be able, I just don't want the complications of having to carry two different types of fuel. I know it's not a big deal. A lot of people go the generator route. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. Now, I already happen to have one of these EcoFlow power stations because when I was living in Texas, if you've ever watched the news during the winter, they can lose power and it gets really freaking cold. Everything ices over. So I already had one of these that ran a small heater just in case for power outages and things like that. So being utilitarian, I thought, hey, I can actually use this EcoFlow battery to run all of my AC components. However, I run into a problem here. This um, plug is outside. So that would mean that I would have to run a cable from outside into the camper through the door or through a window or something like that, while this was either outside or inside, or I'd have to leave it outside plugged in. And then again, I'm risking things like theft and stuff like that. So I needed to figure out a way to be able to run all of these components through my EcoFlow battery, with the EcoFlow battery being inside, and not having to run like cables around and just mess with that kind of thing. So that's where this little guy comes in. This is called a changeover switch. And what this does, let me make a little room here. What this is designed to do is it comes with basically four inputs. So you get one input that goes to an output and another input that goes to another output, and it allows you to change between those two inputs. So if you notice on that picture, you have one, which would mean that group A would go to group B. You have zero, which means that nothing is happening, and then you've got two, which means that group C would go to group D, as an example. And you could pick these up for really cheap on Amazon. Now that changeover switch, there's really good videos on YouTube to see how to wire those, but I wired it so that if it was on position 1, it would call for shore power to lead into the AC power for my camper. However, I've got a position 2, which means that I can pull power from my EcoFlow battery. And as you saw in the previous footage, that EcoFlow battery is inside of the camper. So I'm not running cables around all over. All I have to do is tell the camper, hey, I'm on shore power, so let's put it on position 1. Or, hey, I am on, I want to use my EcoFlow battery, so I'll just put it on position 2. Now, the other reason I wanted to do this is because that changeover, the change switch here will prevent any type of like weird backfeeding issues. So it is true that I could have wired this guy and this guy off of the same wire and just gone directly into the fuse box. But then I wanted this to be as dummy proof as possible. Let's say, for instance, I'm currently running off of EcoFlow battery power and somebody wants to be a good Samaritan and plugs in my camper to shore power, or I forget and plug it into shore power, then you've got some weird backfeeding issues. The EcoFlow will protect itself, but I just wanted this thing to be as dummy proof as possible. So that's another reason for the changeover switch. So now that I've installed the changeover switch, I have the EcoFlow battery, I can now charge AC power in the middle of nowhere. I can also use that AC power to maintain my fridge while I'm driving, because I do not like having it run off of propane while I'm driving, because it can blow out the fumes. I don't think it's recommended either, but I do know some people that do that. I do not. So there we go. Now, what's cool is that because this, remember my fuse box has a converter, that also means that in this case, I can also turn that converter on. And if this battery is running low, I can charge it from my EcoFlow battery. But it does require me to be able to flip a switch, and we want to make this thing as cool as possible. So um, let's introduce something else. How the heck am I going to charge my EcoFlow battery if I'm in the middle of nowhere and it's running low on juice? Well, I can start the truck and the truck will charge it. Or I can add solar. So in my camper, I made the executive decision to add another 200-watt Renogy solar panel on top. So I have 400 watts of capable solar going in. So that means that I can charge my EcoFlow battery off of the solar that already exists on the camper, or I can introduce some external solar because the EcoFlow battery has that converter already built in. So I've got two of these portable solar power panels that I plug and charge into my EcoFlow battery. I hope you're following. This is very long-winded. I apologize. Um, Now, what's cool about that is that the portable thing is an optional thing. Most of the time, I just put one solar panel out, and it's enough to charge this guy up. But looking at this setup, I also wanted a way to be able to use the solar panels, these guys that are on the RV, to be able to charge my EcoFlow battery as well. Because the problem I was noticing when I started building out this hardware is that when this battery gets full, that means that these solar panels are completely useless. They aren't doing anything. So I wanted to make sure that when this battery gets full, I can take the excess and charge it over to the EcoFlow battery. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do this. One really cheap way that you can do this is that you get an XT60 cable, and I just plug it in directly to this battery via a, oops, sorry, via a positive and negative cable. And then these guys would go directly into the back of that EcoFlow, and it would max out at about 200 watts. I could put on another cable, and then it would max out at about 400 watts. However, the problem I have with that setup is that it's not a smart setup, meaning it will continue to draw wattage until that battery is dead. And to me, that's unacceptable because there are going to be instances where, it's cold and I need DC power to be able to charge things like my heater. So introduce the EcoFlow DC to DC charger. Now, this guy's job is to take current from my DC, from the 100 amp hour lithium battery and charge my EcoFlow battery. And what's cool is that all works off of an app on my phone, just the EcoFlow app. And there's a ton of customization with that. Plus, it's smart. I can tell it, hey, when my DC power dips below, let's say, 12.2 volts, I want you to stop, which means that it's not going to completely kill my DC power. That means that I can take the excess from the solar that's on the roof and use that to funnel into the EcoFlow battery, or vice versa. So if this is 100% full and this is at 0%, I can use the app to tell the charge controller, or excuse me, the alternator charger, to take current from here and plug it into here. Holy smokes, this diagram just got like crazy messy. I am so sorry. So this is wild. I do not recommend somebody do this in their camper unless it's a special circumstance or they want to do something like I did, because honestly, all of this can be summed up and just easily maintained by just buying a strong enough converter to be able to run things like your AC and your fridge and all of that stuff. But I really wanted two methods of this. I wanted these specifically in two separate systems so that I can run my AC through that EcoFlow battery, control everything through an app, and it does give you a ton of control, but it also allows me to completely remove this EcoFlow battery and use it for other things. So I use it for yard work. I want to be able to take it outside when I'm camping and plug in a TV or a projector or something like that to be able to watch stuff outside. It's also handy so that if a neighboring camper or something like that is having trouble and they have power tools, we can plug into that and have it right next to the job site. So this does give you a ton of play here. Gives you a ton of options and a ton of control, but it's really only cost effective if you already have half of this hardware already. In my case, I did, so it didn't cost me a lot. Really, the only things I had to buy was one of the solar panels. Um, I bought the changeover switch, was super cheap. I bought the alternator charger. That is not particularly cheap, but I got it on sale. So, just keep an eye on those sales. And that's all I had to buy to set all of this up. Most of the hardware was already here. So it really wasn't too difficult to get this up and running. Okay, so now that we kind of have an idea of how all of this is set up, the really cool thing about how this is set up is that 100 amp hour lithium battery that's in the camper now extends the life of my EcoFlow battery if I want it to. So if I'm doing something like running the AC at night where it's super hot and I can't sleep, that EcoFlow battery will run the AC for about 3 hours or so. But I can then use the EcoFlow alternator charger to funnel energy from my 100 amp lithium battery into my EcoFlow battery, therefore extending the life overnight. And I know that I can set the level so that it doesn't absolutely just kill and demolish that 100 amp hour battery. Um, it's also pretty convenient because since I can reverse the charge, if my DC 100 amp hour battery is super low, I can use that EcoFlow battery to funnel energy the opposite direction. I can also use a maintain mode. So kind of like how you buy a battery maintainer for a vehicle that's not used for a long time, there's a setting in the app that allows you to just funnel little pulses of 100 watts to that battery just to keep it alive, which is also pretty cool. But now I have expanded the total amount of solar that I can put into my camper. So I've got 400 watts maximum on that charge controller. And on my EcoFlow, I have 800 watts of potential solar power that I can plug in there. So, I mean, I just absolutely expanded the amount of solar that I can use in my current setup. It's a little much, but you have to remember that just because you have a 400 watt or a 200 watt rated solar panel, that doesn't mean you're actually going to get the 200 watts consistently. It depends on weather, it depends on where you're at, literally on the globe, atmospheric conditions, the direction that the solar panel is pointed, and don't forget that solar panels do have degradation over their lifespan. They're going to get less and less efficient as you use them and as they age. So this is pretty sweet. Theoretically, on solar alone, I can run everything during the day. I can run my AC, I can run my heater, I can run my fridge, I can do all of these things. And it allows me to expand or minimize my electrical footprint per camping area. Now, keep in mind, you're probably wondering, like, oh my God, that's a lot of electricity. Why would you need all of that? I am not a weekend warrior. I'm a full-timer. I'm living in this camper, so I need as much power as possible. And it's great for times like today. Today, it's been snowing off and on, and I'm not getting the full amount of energy that it's going to be needed for the next few days to completely charge both of these systems up. But since the system is so large anyway, I can go a few days without charging. And then when the next sunny day comes around, I can charge everything up in one day. So it is super complex, but it provides you a ton of control here that I really like. I kind of wish that some of this was made simple. But let's talk about some of the things that I don't like about this system. For one, the EcoFlow alternator charger um, is a little more manually operated than I would prefer. Um, as an example, you can't just kind of set it and forget it. You do have to turn it off and on occasion. Um, with the EcoFlow battery, it does take up a little bit more space than I would like. But what's nice is it does have plugs on all around it. So, most of my laptops and everything like that is plugged directly into the EcoFlow battery. Um, some things I don't like is the actual portable solar panels that I'm using from EcoFlow are super flimsy, so they're kind of a pain in the rear to set up. I do think having those kind that have like an actual like plastic frame that you can kind of fold out are a lot nicer. Um, but other than that, that's really it. I really like the system so far. I can upgrade anything from here. From the EcoFlow family, they have
portable um, like extending batteries that you can buy that I can also plug directly into that EcoFlow battery. It's I forget what they call it, but it's basically just another battery pack that's the same size, but all it is a battery, and that can extend the size. EcoFlow also makes a like an inverter that I could also plug in if I so desired, but I can also upgrade the size of that 100 amp hour lithium battery, which probably would be the cheapest thing. I've seen all the way up to 500 amp hours in campers before. So, you know, um, it's very expandable. There's tons of products out there to allow you to do this, and yeah. Um, so this is what I did with mine.